Hello, and welcome back to Wired for Change, where we look at the people, technology, and ideas reshaping our world. I'm your host, Amy Yee. AI is everywhere right now, but when you look under the hood, there are some real tensions at play. On one hand, we're seeing some extraordinary breakthroughs, like models that can diagnose disease, accelerate research, and support clinical decision-making in meaningful ways. On the other hand, many organizations still struggle with basic questions like what data can we trust, who's accountable, and how do we move fast without breaking things that people rely on? That gap between AI's promise and responsible deployment is something that we're going to talk about today. My guest has spent much of his career at this gap specifically. He's been at the intersection of data quality, privacy, regulation, and real-world AI deployment in healthcare, where the stakes couldn't be higher. Dr. Khaled El Emam is the Canada Research Chair in Medical AI and the leader of the Ottawa Medical Artificial Intelligence Research Institute, or OMARI. He is a full professor at the School of Epidemiology and Public Health at the University of Ottawa. He is the scholar in residence at the Ontario Privacy Commissioner. He is the senior scientist at the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, or CHEO as it's known, and he's a successful entrepreneur. Khaled, you've had a front row seat to how AI goes from research into practice and where it often gets stuck. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Amy, and thank you for inviting me here.
Well, thank you. I'm excited about today. It's a really interesting space. And so I was wondering, to you, what feels most urgent right now when it comes to medical AI?
Well, first of all, let's be clear that AI is not new. It's been around for many decades, and I've been working in the AI space before it was a sexy thing. We're building models, training models, deploying them, and so on. However, there has been a change in the last couple of years. The capability and power of some of these models has shifted in a non-trivial way. So we are in a new world now compared to a few years, even for the folks who've been working in this space. And sometimes I'm actually surprised by the capabilities of the new models. And I'm thinking, well, they can do that now? That's impressive. Mm-hmm. So in the medical space, we are already using AI tools in practice. So a lot of the medical imaging and diagnostic imaging products on the market have AI embedded in them. So they're hardware devices, and they will use AI to interpret the images, to sharpen the images, to do segmentation, to highlight things, etc. And in some cases to also classify, to say whether a particular tumor or not exists in an image, for example. So these things are in the marketplace, and imaging devices are the most common type of medical AI device that's been approved by the FDA. So in the imaging world, it's here, it's been here for some time, and we have products on the market already. You mentioned OMARI in your introduction. So OMARI is a new institute we started last year at the University of Ottawa. So through that, we're getting a lot of queries from the researchers and hospitals in Ottawa. So there's 6 hospitals affiliated with the university. And so the kinds of questions we get from clinician scientists, and from researchers, a lot of them have to do with using large language models, or LLMs. I think folks are realizing the potential, and they're coming to us with problems and say, well, can you help us with this, or how can we solve this problem? And in many cases, a large language model can solve that problem. So there's a real sense of excitement and interest and potential in using these tools to solve today's problems, clinical problems, but also administrative problems. So in terms of paperwork, in terms of documentation. So there's definitely a lot of potential. The other side of this is introducing change into practice is really hard.
Mhm.
especially medical practice, just because um, it's very sensitive and the consequences can be severe. So the extent of evaluation and thoroughness of evaluation, the amount of evidence needed, is significant to convince people, but also to convince regulators to transition an innovation and AI innovation into practice. So, notwithstanding the enthusiasm, we also have to be cognizant of what is actually needed to reliably and safely transition these things into practice, which which can be hard. It does take work and an accumulation of evidence and experience to convince practitioners to adopt a particular tool. Um, so a lot of things at play here, I
Mhm.
think. But anyway, to get back to your question about the biggest gap that we see, I mean, I think there are a lot of problems in terms of just the system-wide problems in terms of availability of services um, and waiting times and so on. So I think there's potential to optimize at the system level to make it more efficient, to reduce the burden on clinicians so that they can see more patients. Sorry, that's the wrong way of describing it. Not to see more patients, to be more efficient
Right.
about how existing patients can be their needs can be addressed through better triaging. Perhaps they certain things do not be to have certain requirements can or requests cannot do not have to be seen by a physician, and so AI can help identify those and expedite those, for example, so the time usage is more efficient. So there's system efficiency level improvements. Uh, and then there is individual efficiency. So maybe we'll talk about AI scribes later on, which allow um, uh, physicians to reduce the amount of time they spend, potentially reduce the amount of time they spend on documentation. And then there are um, uh, applications of AI to improve clinical decision making. So tools at the point of care that can make predictions, so prediction models to help um, clinicians make again, I want to be careful, not better decisions, but help inform their decisions with historical data, so they have another data point to determine what the best course of action is, or for diagnostic purposes as well. We can talk about that. Some really good examples of AI to detect patients that should go for additional testing. Um, so I think the potential is there. The tools are very powerful.
Mhm.
Like I've been in this space for a long time, and like I said, the tools have become quite. Uh, um, like I know folks are skeptical. They sometimes skeptical about AI and though they think it's hype. It's not. Some things work really well, not uniformly across the board,
Mhm.
but for some applications, it really is a material difference and improvement in what we can do. So there's a lot of potential here in all these areas: administrative at the health system, reducing burden, efficiency, clinical decision making.
Interesting. It's really helpful to situate, where we're at because things are changing, very quickly, as well, right? So you talked about medical imaging being one area where, things are quite mature. And, when I buy a new car, I tend to like to, wait till the model's kind of got all the kinks worked out kind of thing. Are there other areas in practice where you're seeing more maturity relative to others?
I mean, natural language processing is another big area that has seen a lot of innovation and improvement, and this is where large language models kind of come from. So that's definitely a lot of maturing that's happened there. And again, the tools are very powerful, but we're not done maturing. I
Mhm.
mean, there's a lot of innovation still happening now, and like I said, I mean, look, there are a lot of smart people out there, and they're coming up with great new ideas all the time. And we have some of those people here at the university, and they're brilliant in their fields. They do great work. Um, so my concern, maybe it's too strong, but what I'd like to see is us being able to accelerate this, add rocket fuel to this, so that we can uh, do more faster and be competitive uh, in the innovation in the space.
Mhm.
So that's really how I view this. There are a lot of smart people around the world. They're going to do great things. There's a lot of money being put into this, again, globally in different parts of the world, and they're going to do great things. So, so the local question is, how can we situate ourselves to compete
Mhm.
in innovation and transitioning our innovations into practice so we can benefit our patients? And then as a general thing, how can we take all of these great ideas and transition them into tools that can be used in practice globally around the world? So how can we compete and how can we transition these technologies into practice? I think for me are the two big questions.
Two of the main drivers for accelerating, I guess.
Yes.
We've got all of these. I think a lot of people would ask themselves, well, we've got AI now. Why isn't it solving all of our problems, like the wait times and the health system problems that we've got? And so there's certainly people who are, waiting for solutions to be deployed. And it is challenging, as you mentioned, to integrate new solutions into practice, particularly into existing systems and ways of thinking and processes and workflows, I assume, and also cultural resistance that might be there also in some places or in some ways. So a lot of challenges there, and the driver of competitiveness as well is an interesting one that a lot of people might not be as up to speed on. I wonder if you could characterize that a little bit more for us in terms of globally what's accelerating. What do we miss out on if we don't ensure that we're accelerating in the right ways or recognizing how to be competitive?
Well, there are a number of ways this can play out.
Mhm.
So we talked about uh, models. So one argument is um, if we're using models that are trained on other people's data, then the models may not work very well for us.
Mhm.
So then we'd be making suboptimal decisions, because we're not using AI that knows how we practice, what our patient population looks like, what their characteristics are, and so on. So that's one risk. The other risk, of course, is dependency.
Mhm.
So if you have strong dependencies on technology or models, or tools from that you don't have control over, then that introduces risks as well. But also the economic risks, in the sense that um, the innovation is a driver of economic benefits, and we can potentially miss out on that. And if this is the future, then we don't want to miss out on that, right? We don't want to be uh, uh, resource-only economy in a future where it's all AI driven. So I think there are real concerns here about being competitive. But the other thing which I would like to emphasize is um, we need to develop a sense of urgency, right? Like, we don't have the luxury of time anymore. The world we're living in today is not like the world we were in even a year ago or 2 years ago. Just the amount of technological change and the speed at which it's happening um, is remarkable. It's great, but it also introduces all kinds of risks. So we need to develop this sense of urgency in moving forward and developing solutions, into transitioning them into practice, into funding them, into getting the social license to get the data, to build these models, to deploy them. Uh, so a lot of decisions have to be made for us to leverage AI to focus on healthcare. Um, and all of these decision makers have to have a sense of urgency to get us there. Because if some of them don't, then they could introduce friction into the process and slow everything down. So we need to collectively uh, have this sense of urgency that this is a problem we need to solve, and we want to be leaders. We're not going to be leaders in everything, but we have some important advantages, um, and I think we can take benefit from those, coupled with a sense of urgency to really uh, uh, establish a leadership position.
It's one of the reasons I started this podcast actually is to help, share those ideas when there's something that's urgent or if there's a challenge or a problem that more people need to be aware of, then how do we share that? So appreciate you being on the show to talk about that. One of the things that we talked about in an earlier offline chat was that you don't want to see any more reports. Can you explain that one a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been working in the data protection and data privacy space for many years, and over the years there have been many reports about why it's important to enable access to data, health data, to do research, to train models, to build products, to innovate, etc. And historically, there's been friction in that process. It's hard to get access to data. There are many reasons for it. Hard to get access. It takes time. There may be restrictions on it, or just no, you can't get access to data. And that's a real problem because data is an important resource. And so, I mean, as a practical thing, historically, we would train our models on data from the US because it's much easier to get data from the US than it is in a Canadian context. But as I said before, the healthcare system in the US is different. So the question is, models trained on that data set, can they be applied here? And in some cases, it's possible, but in many cases, it's not. It's just different. Different populations, different insurance systems, different socioeconomic status of the patients, etc. So, so over the years, there have been many reports written about this. So over the last 20 years, I've seen many, many reports produced. And I mean, I think if you take one of these reports written 20 years ago and republish it today, it would still be valid.
Is
It
that
would
right?
still describe the problems that exist, the same problems, same issues, pretty much the same recommendations about what has to be done to address these issues. So, I don't think we're going to get much ROI or benefit from writing another report on this topic. We know what the problem is. We know that what the prescriptions are to solve it. Let's just get down and do this. So, I mean, this applies to data protection and data access, which I think is one of our biggest advantages and one of the problems that we absolutely have to solve and make it easier and it's happening. Like this is not, I'm not here to complain and saying, oh, the world is ending. It's not. People are teams, groups, colleagues, they're working on this and they're working very hard to solve this problem. So we're making progress. It'd be nice to accelerate it, but now there's a realization that we're working on solving this data access problem. So progress is being made for sure. But I'm leaning towards action now rather than more analysis of the same problems and to come up with the same types of recommendations. Like we really need to put our energy somewhere else.
Great. And it sounds like you're saying, also that, we've got some of the right people working on the right problems right now and some things are happening.
Maybe it's the crowd I hang around with, but the community is converging on that we have to solve this, and they're starting to do something about it. Not everyone, of course. I mean, as is typical, you have the head is aligned and saying all the right things. The body has to move,
Right.
has to follow the instructions of the head. So that's still a work in progress,
Yeah.
and this is across the board. The head is saying all the right things. Leadership understands. They are communicating the right things, what has to be done to leverage AI, to deploy it in practice, to take our innovations and package them and make them available, to scale them, to deploy them. So all the right things are being said. Right discussions are happening at that level, but the body has to now execute. So that still needs to happen. I think there's a lot of friction there.
Okay.
So we have to put in the right incentives. I mean, I think it's a problem of incentives. We haven't incentivized the body to follow what the head is correctly saying has to be done. So we have to work on that, and so every entity, organization has to determine what. You can't just have the same incentives as before and then expect behavior change. So we have to change the incentives
100%.
to align with the desired outcomes, and then the behavior change will start to happen, will start to move in that direction. But certainly there are people who are really pushing for this and doing great things.
Very cool. Very cool. So let's talk about some of those great things. Maybe you could give us a couple of examples from the Canadian context of, things that people are doing right now to help others relate.
Yes, so I'll use some examples from our institution or institutions, but one is an AI algorithm that's been deployed at CHIO. So one of the problem with CHIO is a children's hospital. So one of the problem with kids with rare genetic diseases is that they go undiagnosed for a long time. So this AI algorithm runs at the background and analyzes the medical record of kids, and then flags the ones that should be screened for or to be sent for genetic testing. So historically, this was a manual process. A clinician would realize something and then recommend that the kid gets genetic testing. Right now, this is happening automatically in the background. So I think the last number I heard was around, it has a 70% hit rate, which means that 70% of the kids that are referred are diagnosed. And this is really impactful because, of course, for the parents to know what the problem is or what the diagnosis is if their child is has a condition that they don't understand. So getting a diagnosis is important. It doesn't mean there's a treatment, but it certainly helps the parents, not blame themselves, understand what's going on, but also with a diagnosis, you can get supports at school. So it can help with managing whatever it is the condition is. And prior to this algorithm, the hit rate was about half or less than half.
Wow.
So the kids who would be referred were like half of them were turned out to be correctly diagnosed with something, identify a proper diagnosis. So that's been running now for a year or so. And for the clinicians involved, they see this as a huge success because it's running the background, it's continuously running and identifying kids who should be sent for genetic testing. So that's the Think Rare program at CHIO. I think that's a really good example because it's been in deployment and been in use, and it's quite impactful.
Amazing. Even the impact on one family.
Right.
Just incredible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, another kind of very common example are the AI scribes. So these are the tools that are listening in on the encounters between physicians and patients and producing the documentation afterwards, kind of the notes from the encounter. And, in theory, they should save the clinicians a lot of time because the documentation is done automatically. And, on average, there's some time saving, but it's not evenly distributed. So clinicians, for example, who document very thoroughly by themselves, having a tool automate that process saves them a lot of time. And then those who don't document thoroughly, this time savings will be less, for example. So there is a variation.
Sure.
But to the extent that it can reduce the documentation burden, maybe the quality of the documentation can improve as well. But it allows them, the most common thing is I can be home for dinner, right? It's a burnout thing. So that they can not necessarily see more patients, but just to be able to continue the marathon, so to speak.
Indeed.
And another example that's more patient-directed are these digital companions that can be provided to patients to help them with their understanding their disease and decision-making. So one example is a breast cancer digital companion. So that's one that our team is working on. And for early breast cancer patients, one of the biggest questions they have when they're diagnosed is whether they should have chemo or not. And there's a lot of information there that is not usually easily accessible. So we have a digital companion that provides information based on the patient's specific characteristics. So it's not generic. It's you enter your information about your tumor and so on, your age, menopausal status, and so on. And then it uses that information to help you um, not make a decision for you, but help you make a decision about differences in survival, 10-year survival or 5-year survival between taking chemo or not taking chemo. It also provide information about side effects from drugs, different types of treatments. So it's a tool that can inform patients, and it's based on a lot of data, which is really what again where data comes in. So uh, we if you have a large database of patients, you can say, well, patients like you have this characteristic or had this treatment. This is what happened to them, right? This is their recurrence rate, or these are the symptoms or side effects that they had. So it's data driven, based on a large pool of data from patients, or a subset of patients who had the similar characteristics as the person using this. So these are three, and this is all driven by machine learning, prediction models, simulations, large language models, a lot of AI in that story. But these are all examples of AI applications that are available today or exist today. And this is just, I think, a slice of. There's a lot of innovation, right? So these are things that are practical, that are
Right.
available, readily available. But the pipeline is really interesting as well. I don't know how much of that pipeline is going to make it into practice, but anyway, these are some examples of things that we have here, we're working on here. But of course, there are many more.
Just thank you for sharing those. They're really inspiring examples. With respect to the breast cancer screening one, I'm just curious, is there any human in the loop that is still required with applications like that, or not so much?
Well, there's always a human in the loop because the patient always has to interact with their physician.
Mhm.
But when we talk to patients, we ask them, well, if you have a digital companion, what are the kinds of things you'd like to know? What kind of questions would you have? So one thing came back, which we did not see, was waiting times. I want to know how long it'll take to get my test result,
Mm.
right? So that's a big question. Is it going to take a week, 2 weeks, a month?
Mhm.
Um, so that information is available.
Yeah.
So if you can pull it in and make it, they can ask the question, they'll get an answer.
Yeah.
That's impactful, right? That helps folks make decisions and understand, set expectations. So, so it's not necessarily to, uh, um, direct care.
Mhm.
Is to help them understand, set expectations, and then have a more informed discussion with their physician, right?
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, you know, if you come in with a view and then you have a discussion with your physician, you may change your mind or they
Mhm.
may agree, but at least you're going informed and you have some evidence-informed expectations.
That's interesting. And I mean, certainly from all the internet searching that was happening before, we know it's something that people want to do and want to be able to do. And I love surprises like that when, there's something when we ask kind of the potential users and there's something that, they tell us that is sometimes unexpected in the design of something like that question that you mentioned that people was really on people's minds. I always find that very interesting.
Absolutely.
You just like never know.
And, I mean, patients are doing that already, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In the past, you go to, WebMD, and then it'll tell you that you have
Hmm.
cancer. That's kind of the answer to every
They're
question.
doing that research.
But people would Google, or now they're using ChatGPT. I mean, it's one of the most common use cases for
Mhm.
these tools now is are medical questions and medical queries, and not just patients. Physicians are using it as well. So, I mean, an important consideration is you want to create a safe environment, not these generic tools that have a risk of hallucination. Um, you want to have reliable, evidence-based tools that can provide advice and information to the patients and the clinicians. But also, you have the privacy concern in that if you're entering your personal data, um, look, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, but some of those companies are starting to produce ads as a for revenue generation. And if you're dumped all your lab tests and images there.
Yeah.
The question will be, will any of this be used to serve you even better ads? That's a lot of sensitive information.
Yes.
I'm not saying it'll happen, but it raises the question. So you want a safe environment where you know how the data is going to be used and where the privacy is protected. So I mean, direction, that's where we want to go. We want to move away from these generic tools.
Absolutely. Great. And then so you talked about how like there's all kinds of innovation happening right now. But if we looked at the deployment kind of aspect of things, is there anything that you've noticed in terms of, patterns of, what makes a successful AI deployment in health or medical?
Successful AI deployment. Well, I mean, there are many factors. I think one is evidence. You need some evidence to demonstrate that, to convince clinicians that it works.
Mhm.
You have to convince regulators as well. So depending on how your AI or software as a medical device is classified, then the amount of evidence you need to produce for you to market the product in Canada, for example,
Mhm.
is important as well. So you have an innovation, you do research, it's fine, and then when you start marketing it, so marketing is defined broadly. It doesn't have to be for money. You can market it for free as well. Then the Health Canada regs can come into play, and then you have to determine how to classify your AI tool,
Mhm.
class 1, class 2, class 3, depending on what the intended use is. And then that will determine how much work is needed, how much evidence is needed to bring that to market. So that's a time and money problem.
Mhm.
Um, so the regulations are one thing, the evidence is another thing, and then I mean, adjusting clinical workflows is always a challenge, and I think. I mean, a lot of innovations fail theirs because they are developed without taking into account the clinical workflows, and they just don't fit. They can result in changes that don't make sense or extra work or interruptions. So you have to understand the clinical workflows they're integrating into to have something that has a chance of being adopted.
Mhm.
Um, and then, of course, you have who's going to pay for it. It's probably the most. I should have started with that one. That's probably the first question and the last question.
The
That
money question.
the money question. It's always about the money. Who's going to pay for it? So, especially if it's in a clinical setting, um, are the payers? Who's the payer? Is it public sector? Public insurance, private insurance, um, and have they agreed to pay for it? Is it covered? Not covered? How do you get there? And that's not easy. Getting your product covered is a process as well, and you have to figure out how to do that as an innovation. It could be an AI innovation as well. Someone has to pay for it, or is it
Yeah.
the patient themselves, or if it's primary care, is it the practice? They can just use their own money to pay for it if it really provides value to them. Um, so who's going to pay for it is probably the first question you have to answer. And if you don't have an answer to that question, then I'd go back and spend time to answer that question. And it may not be easy, it may take time, but you
Yeah.
need to have a pathway before embarking on the journey of trying to deploy your innovation or AI tool. You have to answer that question. It's going to be hard to get investors to put money into taking your innovation into practice and going through that journey unless you have a good answer to who's going to pay
Mm.
question.
Yeah, probably one of the biggest frictions to taking something to market.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who
Okay.
the payer,
Mhm.
and, um, or you can talk to, private sector, you can talk to pharmaceutical companies. That could be a pathway for them to embed it within something else that's already covered. So there are many ways, but you need to have a pathway for this.
Mhm. With respect to, these stories of things that are happening in Canada, do you think that, these stories are getting enough attention? Well, maybe they are. I don't know.
I think a lot of the narrative is general, like general AI.
Mhm.
It's not really specific to medical innovation, at least in the kind of public discourse. Um, so, so I think there's room
Mhm.
for telling stories about the medical innovations and how they're impacting care and they're impacting patients. So again, I'll go back to Omari, the Ottawa Medical AI Research Institute at the University of Ottawa. So one of our objectives is to tell our stories. we have really good stories.
Hmm.
We have great innovations, we have great researchers, we have great clinicians, and they're doing really interesting things. They're having an impact on care. Um, and we are going around all the hospitals and gathering these case studies and stories, and we want to tell their stories to let the world know and let our community know that these things are happening here, and how they're impacting care and improving it. And I think that's helpful from a number of perspectives. One is in building trust. Like, people are working on solving these problems.
Yeah.
We hear about the problems all the time, but there are good solutions as well. And folks are doing some great work to come up with these solutions, and they're happening here. They're being deployed here, and so by telling these stories, we're making our patients, our community aware that this is happening, and helps with the narrative, with the trust, um, in the health system as well.
It does. It helps to influence, where things go for sure.
Well, I mean, the other thing is, we always talk about the social license, right? So, um, in order to innovate, we need access to data. We need access to resources. So why should we get resources versus something else?
Hmm.
So we always have to make the case to the public, especially if we're using public resources, why investing in this is important.
Hmm.
Um, and if we're not telling our stories, then we're not even making the case. We may make the case, and they may still say no, right?
Yes, sure.
But at least let's make the case.
Yeah.
So getting the social license to allocate resources to this is important, but also social license to get access to the data. Like I said, AI is fueled by data. We need to um, reduce the friction to get access to data and do it in a responsible way. We know how to do this. This is not new. We have really good regulators in Canada,
Okay.
privacy regulators. They are very careful. They're very thoughtful. They're very deliberate. They have put rules. They enforce the rules. And so we have a good framework, regulatory framework. Um, and then we have good methodologies, good standards, good tools, good technologies to get access to data and use it in a responsible way, right? But part of that is the social license. The public also has to know that this is happening and how it's being used, the value of this, so that in other countries where this issue was not um, dealt with, and prime example is in the UK, where they've had a couple of missteps over the years of um, using health data for secondary purposes, and then the public was uh, reacted negatively, and civil society was not convinced, and so they had to reverse those efforts. So we can learn a lot from those experiences, and so this idea of social license is important. So we have to tell our stories, explain what we're doing, and build that trust over time.
Absolutely. That's great. And then you mentioned international a little bit as well. And so I wanted to ask you, is there anything that inspires you or that, we can learn from that comes to mind, for you? Maybe maybe it changes weekly, but in terms of something that inspires you internationally, whether it's innovation or process or standards kind of related.
Well, I mean, I'm watching, other countries and their policies to incentivize um, innovation,
Mhm.
right, in this space and
Mhm.
transition it into practice. So it's always the money thing. So okay, fine, money, but I mean, there's more to it than that. So um, uh, for me, the number one thing for any successful endeavor is people,
Mhm.
right? It's the talent. It's getting the right people, getting the best people here.
Mhm.
So we have to make it easier and create incentives to attract the best people to come and work here and stay here, not just come, but we want them to stay.
Mhm.
Um, so that's number one. It's always after the money, the talent. So we need to have the talent and the folks. And um, if we're not able to grow the talent ourselves because we're not a large country, then we have to look to other places around the world where the talent exists and attract those folks to come here. The other one is the regulatory regime. I mean, about regulations for around AI and how to the risk management for AI and um, rules around its deployment and so on. I mean, it has to be approached as a risk management exercise, right? There's always going to be a risk, so I have to approach it from a risk perspective. But also, we have to be cognizant of what other countries are doing from a regulatory perspective. So recently, the FDA changed its rules around clinical decision support tools, which would include AI-based tools, and they've made it easier to bring those products to market. So then the question is, what can we learn from that? Should we follow suit? Should we not? But we have to keep an eye on what's happening around the world, especially with gold standard agencies like the FDA, which have at least traditionally and historically set the pace for the rest of the world. But the other thing about regulation is regulatory uncertainty. So we need to have regulatory clarity. Whatever the regulation is, people will adapt. They'll find a way to work with it. If it's not a good regulation, it will introduce friction. But if it's clear, at least people can process that and act and make decisions. It's the uncertainty that's the problem. So we need to have regulatory certainty on all aspects around AI. So regulation of AI tools, regulations on data, regulations on risk management around AI products and so on. So the regulatory certainty is important. And then the other important one, I think, is compute, right? So again, we're competing globally for compute. So the price of RAM, random access memory, used in the memory in computers, has just gone up dramatically over the last few months. So the cost of compute has gone up, right? Like quite a bit. And that's because it's just a supply and demand thing. Like everybody wants more compute, so the price of the raw material, basically the chips, is going up. I mean, that introduces a number of things. Had we bought compute 6 months ago, we'd have gotten more for the same dollar.
Yeah.
So sense of urgency.
Sense of urgency, that's true.
We should just, we know we need this. Let's stop debating it and discussing and saying, well, should it be on this side of the road or on this side of the road? Because there's a consequence, there's a cost to waiting and not making the decisions sooner rather than later. But getting compute is important. We have the power component, right? Powering large compute. I think in Canada we have an advantage. So we can leverage that to increase our compute capacity to support AI innovation and AI development. But we have to solve this as well. And then we're looking around the world. Everybody's moving very fast, right? So again, go back to the sense of urgency. We have to be able to respond quicker and make decisions. Don't write any more reports, right? We need to be able to act and solve some of these. We know how to solve them. This is what really frustrating is. We know how to solve these problems, right? So let's just get to it and work on solving these problems.
Right. Just get started.
Let's get started.
Or keep going. or move faster.
Yeah, I mean, it's talent, it's compute, it's data, it's regulation, which actually are, the kind of the pillars of Omari, right? These are the things we want to address as well. But these are the things we need to address in order to move ahead. And they're not, they're hard problems, but we have good people. We can work on these problems.
Thank you for that. I want to pick up on the talent piece for a moment.
Yes.
And, you work with lots of people. You have students, you have researchers, all kinds of people around you. What, qualities have you seen or characteristics have you seen in people who are successful at moving these things forward, and successful at, AI and putting things into practice?
I was actually um, asked to write, what are your um, recommendation for next generation? And but it's basically answering that question. I mean, look, the best people I have worked with are the multidisciplinary people, right? So the problems we're dealing with today, especially on AI development and deployment and so on, are very complex. They require multiple disciplines to work together. Great, we know that. But the unicorns are the ones who have the multiple disciplines embedded within the same person, because then they can just switch between different domains, see parallels, use that knowledge to solve a problem in the separate domains. So multiple disciplines could be a computer scientist and a lawyer, or a lawyer and a clinician, or a clinician and a computer scientist, right? So they have multiple areas of expertise, and so those are the unicorns. Right? Those are the ones that have really an advantage. Um, and it's you can't tell someone will go spend another 10 years and develop another career, right? But some people do that, and if you do that, these are the folks you want, right? They're really valuable folks on the team. So that's one thing that I would look for in folks, and there's certain characteristics that are really stand out. And then the other thing is, and I think this is really important. And actually, it was an interview with Obama, and he made the point, which is absolutely right. Is he likes to have people who get stuff done. Just go and do it. Right? Figure it out. You have the problem, maybe an ambiguous, maybe uncertain. Just go and figure it out and get it done. So people who get stuff done are the best people.
That's true. I love those people.
Right. So
the best.
Find those people. Right. They're operational. They get stuff done. Whatever stuff is, whatever the problem is, just folks who get things done. Really important. And then the other characteristic, I think it's especially for folks who are going to take more leadership positions. And again, I believe this is so true. Is you need to have this pragmatic optimism. And again, I like this quote from Jensen Huang, who's CEO of NVIDIA, and the interviewer asked him, what would you tell your 23-year-old self? Right? What would you learn? You started this company, it's now like the most valuable company in the world, etc. And his answer was, don't do it. Right? If you know how hard it is, how many sacrifices you'd have to make, how challenging the path is going to be, you would never do it. We'd be nuts to do something so hard. So you have to fool yourself into believing that it's not going to be that hard, that you're going to be the exception, and that you're going to plow through. So that, but you can't be nuts either. You have to be pragmatic, right? But
how nuts are you? It's a scale.
Right. But you have to have that optimism. You have to believe that that this is, your path will be different, right? You have to believe they're going to solve the problem. You have to have that optimism, because if you always think that all problems are hard and you're pessimistic about how things are going to turn out, you're not going to be able to go through this process. It's a very hard process. Innovation is very hard. Transitioning technology into practice is very hard. Doing everything we talked about the last little hour or so is really hard. So you have to fool yourself into believing that it's not going to be hard in order to do it. Otherwise, you wouldn't do things like this. So that's important. So this pragmatic optimism is in the attitude and the perspective of the world is important to handle hard problems. But not everybody has to handle hard problems. It's just for the leaders who have to do this or who want to do this. They need to have this characteristic in order to plow through. So anyway, these are a few examples of things I would be looking for.
Those are great examples. And you led right into kind of the leadership and entrepreneurial question that I was going to ask, as well, which was, for entrepreneurs in this space, do you have a sense that, it's just like entrepreneurs in any space, or are there any ingredients that would help, prepare someone or make someone better suited to entrepreneurialism in this space specifically as an entrepreneur yourself?
I don't know. I think it's just a personality thing. I mean, we talk to students at the university, and
Mhm.
they have so many ideas. And now that building tools is easier with vibe coding and so on, they can build stuff themselves and try things out and so on. Because they're living the problems, and so they can build tools to solve problems for themselves, and these could be good seeds for companies. But um, going from this is an interesting idea to building a company, it's not a small step, right?
Yeah.
It's a huge step, and I don't think folks realize how hard it is. But it's very fulfilling. And I mean, the way I view this is, so one of my hats is as a researcher, and we do research and so on, and we write papers, they get published, we get rewarded for all of that, and it's fine. But if you come up with something interesting, the average time from when your work comes out to it's being deployed is around 20 years, right? So by commercializing your work yourself or with others, licensing it, you can accelerate that so that your work would have an impact in a shorter period of time. And I mean, some folks, for them, the academic rewards are sufficient and they're happy and they're done. But if you want your work to have an impact in the real world, then commercialization is one of the best ways to do that. Because then you can take it, you can uh, convert it into a practical solution that can then be deployed in practice at scale globally. And in our world, you can have an impact on a very large number of patients as well. So, some of the work we've done before, we were a small piece of a big process to bring drugs to market. But there's that sense of satisfaction that we developed a technology that was used in bringing a treatment to market, and this treatment now is saving or helping 100,000 or 1 million patients every year. So you're having, again, it's a small piece, but you're playing a role in having a very large impact on the world's population, right? So I would strongly encourage folks who are interested in having an impact to commercialize. Um, but the other side of it is, and we discussed this earlier on before the recording, is the doing this is very hard, right? So you have to take care of yourself as well as a person who's going to go through this journey, because it's a very hard journey. It's very taxing on the individual, on the family, on relationships, and so on. And I've worked with other entrepreneurs before and leaders and really good leaders. And I learn a lot from them by observing, how they handle problems, how they deal with issues, etc. They don't know that I'm watching them, but I'm watching
You're a
and learn.
researcher.
I'm watching them and learning them and listening to everything they say. Like there are lots of those experienced entrepreneurs have lots of words of wisdom,
Yeah.
and so, but one of them is take care of yourself. So, diet, sleep, exercise, because it's a very stressful thing to do and very taxing, and you have to be able to withstand that pressure over an extended period of time. And if you're not taking care of yourself, that's not putting you in a good position to keep going through this. So I think that's an important thing for entrepreneurs to pay attention to as they go through this. Unless they, I mean, you always get lucky, right? You can just start and then quickly you scale and everything goes well and there are no problems.
No problems. They sleep, 8 hours a night.
That's the fairy tale, right? Usually it's harder than that.
Right.
So I think that's really important as well to be able to make it through this entrepreneurial journey. And I mean, I'll speak to the University of Ottawa. University of Ottawa has really good supports in terms of funding, mentorship. I mean, mentorship. So in my case, when I first started, I had really good mentors, and it wasn't a choice. I was given a mentor and said, the first person who put money in said, okay, and then you're going to work with this person, right? No, it's my company. I want to. No, no, no. And that was the best decision, right? I
Uh-huh.
had a mentor who, uh, or someone like an adult in the room, basically,
Mhm.
who guided and directed, light touches and nudges, which was great, good. Uh, but that was very important to avoid big mistakes and to remain focused and so on. So I think finding a mentor, especially if you're doing this for the first time, is absolutely critical, or a guiding hand, let's say. So the university does that. It helps with mentorship, it helps with funding, it helps with education, with connections, and so on. So there are some very good programs here, and I'm sure a lot of other universities have the same thing to help faculty and students go through this journey.
It's so important to have that support network, and those habits, that you mentioned as well, and it's so hard, you think, "I don't have time, I don't have time," right? But you do have to make the time, and it's, something that I learned from a mentor, myself, actually. So the role of mentorship is critical, I think. I was just having a conversation last night with a friend, and I was asking, like, "Who does Elon Musk listen to? Like, does he have a mentor?" And I think he has people that he listens to as well, which is really interesting. But I think it's always good to talk about, leadership and how to support leadership and how, to be effective as a leader as well. So thanks for bringing those points up on the podcast. I want to go back to, from an entrepreneurial perspective, one of the other things we talked about was IP, and how maybe the role of IP has changed, or how to think about IP in this context that we have today.
Right. So, I mean, I don't want to make general statements about IP because IP can apply to anything, many topics. So I'll just focus on my world of IP,
Yes.
not like if you're talking about hardware, um, talking about devices that rely on physics or biology. If you discover something, then it's there. It's how the world works, and it is what it is, right? So
Yeah.
I'm talking about software and algorithms, right? So we're developing algorithms, AI algorithms, or computational algorithms, and so the question is uh, the role of protecting them. So I mean, IP is important. Protection of IP is important for many reasons, but it's not necessarily the reasons people think it's for.
Mhm.
Uh, so so I mean, I'll give you some examples. Um, I think this happened in every company I've been involved. Is you have patent trolls, right? So folks who just send you a request saying you're infringing on their patent. The patent may have nothing to do with you.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
so you can either fight it, or if you have your own patent, and you can say, no, I have a patent for this, and you argue with them, or you just pay them off and they go away. It's cheaper usually to pay them off than go away because it's more expensive to fight them. But you need to have some IP to be able to protect yourself from the kind of that type of nuisance situations. But also, it adds value to the company. If you're running a business and having patent, it demonstrates that you have created value. You have some um, technology that is new, that's different, that gives you it's a differentiator. It gives you an advantage in the market,
Mhm.
right? So, and the, it will if someone copies you, will you go after them? That's a business decision.
Mhm.
If you're a small company, you may not have the resources. When you get acquired, perhaps your buyer will do it for you.
Mhm.
Um, but the key point is, if you bring a group of smart people in the room, they will come up with a better algorithm, right? So whatever thing you've invented, um, don't assume that someone cannot do a better job and come up with a better algorithm um, than what you've done and patent that, right? So they don't have to infringe on your patent. They can just build something better,
Mhm.
right? You can always come up with a better algorithm. We do it all the time, right? We see something, say, well, that's good. I have a better idea. I'm going to try it out. And you try a couple of things and you come up with a better algorithm or method to solve the same problem, right? So by having a patent, it does not necessarily mean you've created uh, a moat that will survive for a long time, unless you're continuously innovating.
Mhm.
So this is why I think university spinoffs have a superpower, because they can continue innovating if they maintain a relationship with the research university. because then you have access to that engine that keeps innovating and then keeps coming up with even better and better and better algorithms over time. So you're always ahead of the game.
Mhm.
Because if you stop, someone will always come up with a better algorithm that will solve the same problem. And so then, your patent is no longer protecting you against that. It still has value.
Mhm.
I'm not saying it doesn't have value. It
Right.
still has value, but it's not necessarily going to protect you because someone else can come up with a better algorithm. So we just have to be thoughtful and deliberate in parsing out the benefits of certain types of IP protection, what value it actually gives. And by understanding that, then you can change your behavior to continue maintaining that moat, which is you have to continue innovating all the time to protect yourself against this next smart person who'll come up with a better algorithm,
Right.
right? And this, like I said, this is why university-based spin-offs have that superpower. I don't know if they always take advantage of it,
Right.
but it's a superpower because you can continuously innovate and stay ahead of the game if you're able to take advantage of the research machinery that exists at the university.
Hmm. Really interesting. And it also, I mean, it's got that sense of urgency kind of attached to it as well, in terms of needing to continue to innovate.
You have to continue to
Yeah.
innovate, right? Because, like I said, we do it all the time. We see a problem. If it's protected, we'll just come up with a better solution,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Like I said, you bring the talent to get smart people in the room.
Right.
They'll come up with something that is solves the same problem faster or different way, but they'll come up with something better, right? So again, this is not a general statement about patents or IP,
Sure.
but it's just very specific to my world of models and AI and algorithms and so on.
Okay. All right. And then we run into the limited resource problem, right? And then
But
so
let's go to statement number one.
statement number one.
It's all about the money.
Exactly.
You start from
So
there, and then you kind of build the tree from there. But you need the resources to keep fighting and competing and building, right?
that's right. That's right. And so, I mean, even if we're wildly successful and get tons of money, there are still others who have more money or will have access to more money or funding. So from a competitive landscape kind of perspective, or how to compete, how do we in Canada continue to compete? Like what is a strategy that we can look at to give ourselves hope that it's not just about who's got the most money?
Well, again, it's talent, right? Just
Mhm.
get the best people, right? Um, and get all these characteristics we spoke about, right? And keep them so they continue innovating and
Yeah.
continue solving these problems. Again, in our world, that's next thing would be access to data,
Mhm.
right? So for the work we do, um, the we have very valuable data. In many cases, it's population level data. And so we need to make it easier in a responsible way. I'm not saying open the gates and do irresponsible things. You can do it in a responsible way. So get access to the data. So talent, data, and then the other components for this type of work, like I said, are compute and regulatory certainty. Um, and so these are the ingredients for us to be competitive. Um, are other people doing this? Yes. Everybody is, has the same idea. But I think we have data is one of our advantages. Um, because we have a very diverse population, so kind of representative of the world. But again, I mean, it's an advantage. It's not a insurmountable for uh, others to achieve that or get something similar. But that combination, I think, is powerful. And then being smart, right? So choose problems that we can solve and be the best at, right? And they're not necessarily the same problems that everyone else is trying to solve,
Mhm.
right? Um, and so, as a practical thing, I mean, okay, so um, if you look at it at the national level, um, for to be successful, there are multiple layers of the stack, of the technology stack that we need to have. We're not going to be able to build everything. So we need to have access to other tools and technologies. And so we need to have reliable partners that we can build on.
Mhm.
and then focus our energy on niches where we can really excel and be the best at that and have an advantage. But we're not going to, I shouldn't say we're not going to, it's just harder to build
Mhm.
the full stack,
Yeah.
right? Because the amount of resources and time and that's needed to do all of that is uh, might not be the best choice. But we need to find folks who've done that already that we can work with, build
Mhm.
on that, and then find our niche and build something that we can really be the best at.
Mhm.
And so you need to be smart about this,
Yeah.
right? Trying to do everything all the time, it's not going to work.
Okay.
So I mean, in our world, we know what we're good at, we know where the problems are, so we try to focus on those and become the best in those areas.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for stringing all that together and connecting those dots. That's great.
But
So I want to ask you, it would be silly of me not to ask you any questions about de-identification or privacy or just safe data use, I think. It would be amiss. I'm going to pivot a little bit to some of your work with the Ontario Privacy Commissioner. And ask you about shaping like practical de-identification guidance. Can you comment on what regulators are actually looking for today with respect to evidence that data is safe to use, beyond good intentions or policy statements?
um, okay, so first of all, I'll say that we're very fortunate in Ontario to have the Ontario Privacy Commissioner. This one, but also historically, we've had really good commissioners over time, and definitely this commissioner as well, uh, because the approach the office has taken is supportive of innovation and pragmatic. So still do things responsibly, but really work with the community to problem solve and find responsible ways to get things done, which is fantastic. Because not all regulators around the world are like that,
Hmm.
right? And so the challenge with this type of regulation is the you can optimize on privacy only, right? But if you optimize on privacy only, you and ignore other criteria like economic benefit, competitive advantage, value of data, then you may end up having perfect privacy, but really not enabling data use, data sharing, and that has consequences as well, right? Consequences that are potentially harmful, or you lose potential benefits.
Hmm.
So, and some regulators optimize only on privacy, right?
Right.
Uh, but we're fortunate in an Ontario context that our regulator is optimizing on multiple criteria simultaneously, which is great. And other regulators around the world do that. So you have all kinds, right? But the best model, one of the best models I think is actually the Singapore regulator because it's
Mm.
in their mandate to support economic development and protect privacy. So they have to balance those two things and optimize on two criteria as part of their mandate. But we're very fortunate in Ontario that we have that regulators that have taken that perspective. Um, and so what can we learn again around the anonymity or data protection perspective? We can learn from the investigations that have been published by these regulators and what they emphasize and what they look for. And so my interpretation of these
Hmm.
investigations, the public ones, is that if you follow best, I mean, again, we know how to do this,
Okay.
right? It's just not, it's hard, fair enough. There are good tools there and there's good expertise to do it, but we know how to do this. So if you follow best practices, then when the organizations that did that were investigated, the finding was, yeah, you did well. There's no problem with how you protected the data. There may be other problems, things they didn't do well, like with contracting, or transparency is always a big thing, or has been a big thing in the sense that when you use data in a way and you're not transparent about it, the regulators have noted that. Like you have to be transparent for health data to the patients, for example, to keep them aware about that you're using their data, even if you're anonymizing it or de-identifying it, and what the purposes are. So transparency is very important, clearly. But on the de-identification or anonymization part, they have, if it's done one of follows best practices, then it's fine. So do that. And the Ontario Privacy Commissioner in October of last year has published new guidelines for de-identification. So for the listeners who don't know what de-identification is,
Mhm.
you have data and it's personal information. Let's say health data and it's personal information, right? And there are a lot of restrictions on what you can and cannot do and how to protect this type of personal information. So, and it's very restrictive, which is the right thing to do. But then if you manipulate this data, if you transform it and make it harder to identify individuals, then it becomes non-personal information. So as an example, if you have someone's date of birth, instead of the date of birth, you convert that to the decade they were born. Or if you have someone's postal code, then you, instead of having the postal code, you convert it to the city, right? So in a Canadian context, for example, your date of birth and 6-character postal code are essentially unique identifier because like 96, 98% of the population is unique on just these two pieces of information. Because postal codes are quite small, right? The number of people who live in a postal code is not large, and then you add a date of birth to that, and essentially becomes a unique identifier. So you never want to put these two pieces of information together
Right.
and say, I don't know who the person is, because it's quite easy to figure out who it is with that type of information. Okay. So de-identification means you remove information or you reduce the level of detail, like from postal code to city or date of birth to decade of birth. And that way it's not possible, or it's very difficult. The likelihood is very small that you can identify a person. And then you have de-identified information. Under the law, if you have de-identified information, then you can use it for secondary purposes, which means for purposes that were not initially intended or planned for when you collected the data at the outset, because it's no longer personal information. So the Privacy Commissioner of Ontario has published what I would say are really good, award-winning
Yes.
guidelines.
I saw that.
Yeah, very fast. Right?
Yes.
It came out and right away won some awards, but very good guidelines on how to do this that follows best practices. They went through extensive consultation with the community, with stakeholders, so a lot of input from very knowledgeable people in Ontario and across the country. So these are best practices,
Yeah.
right? So if you follow those, then you would be able to make a claim that it's no longer personal information, and it allows you then to use that for other purposes, such as training AI models, for example. And again, we know how to do this. There are good tools, good methodologies for solving that problem, and that's one way to enable access to data, right? So, and I think given that there are no comparable identification guidelines across the country, I would project or that the Ontario guidelines will become the de facto standard across the country. So we have good Canadian guidelines. Let's use them and start working on or continue working on solving this problem, so we can enable access to data that would then enable the innovation, all this innovation that we're talking about, and not just innovation in research, but also building companies, commercialization, building tools that can provide economic benefit as well.
Thank you for that. And so from the perspective of an innovator who's trying to navigate this, let's say an innovator in Ontario, they can look at Ontario guidelines, but do you have any advice, until sort of we have like one, set of guidelines to rule us all in Canada kind of thing? Any advice for innovators, within this period to try to, navigate all the complexity of rules in different jurisdictions?
Just follow the Ontario guidelines.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
just
Okay.
do that. They're good
Okay.
guidelines. Use them.
Okay.
I think it'll be hard for someone to argue that they're not reasonable to follow.
Okay.
Right? They follow best practices. They're consistent with international standards. They're up to date. They're just completed a few months ago. So they're a really good place to start.
Excellent.
And there's nothing else.
Okay.
And I can't imagine someone coming up with something else that would be dramatically different.
Okay.
Because this describes a process that has been battle tested. It's been in use for many years. A lot of experience and knowledge has gone into it. So just follow the Ontario guidelines.
Okay, great. Is there a place for community and public engagement in kind of the rollout of these guidelines, or in continuing to shape, what is expected or what the risks are in terms of privacy?
Well, I mean, one of the elements of feedback that we got while we were developing these guidelines was developing industry-specific or sector-specific versions of it. right? So that the identification guidelines are generic; they apply to any domain, any industry. I mean, they're intended for the regulated entries of the privacy commissioner, so public sector, universities, and law enforcement, and so on. But really, they can be applied to anything, any sector. So one suggestion was, can we create industry specific or domain specific versions of this, potentially community specific versions of this, so customizations that address the specific needs with examples and use cases that are more targeted to a particular community, particular industry, a particular set of use cases. So that could be something that would can be done and would help with their adoption and add value to them. I don't believe that the Paris Commission is planning to do something like that, but it's certainly open for the community and other members of the private and public sector to work on something like that.
It's great to know that there's room for that. I think that there are people with an appetite to work on that.
It'll make it easier to use and adopt, and then building tools on top of that as well. That there are tools coming into the market now to support the Ontario guidelines, to operationalize them, make them easy to use. So to the extent that an ecosystem will develop around them to consultants in terms of technology and so on, that will help with their adoption, then that's of course good, and will make it easier to get access to data and to reuse data for these secondary purposes.
It'd be great to be able to incentivize some of that engagement and collaboration as well.
I mean, incentives is always a challenge, but my experience is the need for data now is so acute, like such huge demand for data, because everyone wants to use their data to do better, to learn, to use all these great new tools and capabilities that are coming on board and are available. So there's a huge demand for data within organizations. And so really the question is, how fast can the organization move to solve these problems, adopt these best practices to unlock access to their data so they can do all these interesting things. I go into organizations and they have, AI teams, AI centers of excellence, analytics centers of excellence, et cetera, that are trying to leverage all that data. But they need to get access to the data, right? They have the right authority and the right processes to get access to this data to do their magic and help solve business problems and so on. So there's a big appetite, and we need, the companies, organizations have to create the right incentives to make this happen, right? So everybody has to be aligned that this is a good thing. There's value to making this data available. And not optimize on privacy only, optimize on multiple things simultaneously, and then adopt best practices in order to enable those data scientists to do their thing with that data, right? It's not. I was going to say it's not complex. It's everything is hard to do, but we know how to do it, right? There's no reason that this cannot be done. We're not the first people to encounter this problem. It has been done before.
Okay, reassuring, I guess, in a way. All right. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation with you today. There's so much to learn from you, truly, Khaled. I'm going to ask just one last question.
Absolutely.
I was going to ask what would you like to see more of, but I think we've answered that. So the question I will ask you is just what's making you optimistic right now? It's what you're doing is really hard. What a lot of people are doing is hard. What's fueling your optimism?
Fueling my optimism. It's a very I guess very personal thing, but it's my team. I have such a good team, and it feels like we can do anything, right?
That's awesome.
When you have a good team, it feels like nothing is impossible.
Yes.
So I'm optimistic because of that. Again, like I said, it's it's the talent, right? If you have a good team, then you're able to do magic, right? And I think for us, that's the moment in time when we have a great team. We've had great teams before, but
Right now,
for now, we have a great team, And at this point in time, with all the innovation and so on, and the sense of urgency, etc. Um, so I just think we can conquer anything at this point. So I'm very optimistic about that. Um, and we have great support as well. So for just because again the confluence of things happening, great support to really do the kinds of things that all the stuff we spoke about to make it happen. So I'm optimistic about that. So let's have another conversation a year from now.
Beautiful. Yes, please.
Then I can tell you whether I've been living in a fairy tale.
How did this all play out?
Yeah, how did this all play out? Or any of my predictions and assumptions were correct. So, but yeah, that would be my thing. This is really what I feel is exciting.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So lots of exciting things, and it's a great shout out to your team as well. Stay if you're part of Khaled's team. He wants you to stay. And I think that wraps up our show for today. But I would love to have you back again sometime. And congratulations on everything that you're doing, following closely, of course. And I'd recommend that folks, go to the Omari site as well to stay on top of stories and things are being published also. And I'll make sure to put the link in the show notes. And if you're interested in, ideas and people and technology that's changing the world, really encourage you to subscribe to Wired for Change. Thank you so much for listening to another show. Take care and see you next time.